Do not go and bother anyone mentioned in this video. Support? Yes. Bother? No. This is just sort of a down memory lane kind of video. If you are Sav, first of all, hi there. Hope everything is going well. Secondly, this probably isn't going to be the most necessarily fun watch for you for the majority of the runtime, as I'm going to be spending a fair amount of time looking back at some of your older content that has not aged the best, being completely honest. For a better experience, skip the whole video to this timestamp that you see on the screen, the "Where is he now" section of the video. When you get older, you unfortunately get hit a lot with these moments of, remember when? And sometimes it's just incredibly weird niche things that you're kind of interested in. I wouldn't exactly call this thing like nostalgia, because usually that's drawn from a sense of comfort in an old memory, and I wouldn't call it a flashback because it's not like an all-consuming pull into the past. It's just kinda, that happened. So, when I first joined Deviantart as a tween, I did so at the behest of a family friend's kid. She was loud, brash, pushy, and kind of a little brat when we were kids, juxtaposed to my very timid and anxious personality. I tended to just go along with what she and many of my peers demanded of me, since I couldn't really stick up for myself and I just wanted to have friends and fit in, etc., kid stuff. After making the account, she demanded, that I make OCs with her for the Nickelodeon show El Tigre. I didn't have cable, I never watched the show, but doing some little preliminary research of the show using the local library, I gathered it was about some kind of superhero thing, and they were animal themed and wore masks. I'll be honest, I still don't know what El Tigre is about, but maybe I should pick it up just for the sake of understanding what this kid was so obsessed with. Anyway, I made an OC using a pre-made base and MS Paint because this was long before I really got into digital art. She commented something kind of excitable and encouraging. I don't recall exactly what it was, but everything seemed well enough. I was having fun and I thought I was making a friend. But then randomly and abruptly, literally a couple of weeks later, she started harassing me and spamming me with the most insane accusations imaginable for my 11-year-old self, accusing me of stealing her art, her ideas, and that I was out to get her or something. I don't know. She started threatening to come to my house, since again, this is a family friend's kid, so she knew where I lived, and a bunch of other stuff, and I had 2 uploads on the entire account at the time, and I was just severely confused because she's the one that wanted me to make the account in the first place, but now her and some other kids with LT Gray OCs on the site were also spamming me nonsense on her behest. I ended up blocking her and then telling her mom about the situation next time we were at a get-together, which in turn her mom just kind of shrugged and said that she just had issues. She remained kind of mean and incredibly unpredictable until I was in high school and I stopped seeing her around. Looking back at her behavior, now that I'm an adult, it makes sense that she had some sort of mental health issue that her mom just was not acknowledging properly. But nowadays, I hope she's doing well, all things considered. This entire preamble ramble is to pad the runtime and just say that I've had a DA account since I was frankly too young to even have one, and I used to make and post very cringe fandom OCs there. Don't even get me started on my Naruto era. That was honestly the most ridiculous one of the bunch. And this whole memory of this kid I used to know as a tween got me thinking about an era of YouTube where people would make rant and roast style videos about OCs that they found randomly on DeviantArt. It was a weird time to be sure, since it was obvious that little thought went into rationalizing the opinions featured in these critiques, and intelligent arguments were lost for the sake of cheap comedy. One of those creators was actually really hard for me to remember because he ended up deleting all of his YouTube content and then he rebranded his entire social media presence. All I could remember at first was it was during the loud equals funny time of the internet, and an anthro husky with a green tongue. Then, as I was just scrolling through YouTube looking up to see if any other OC rant creators were still around making the same kind of content, the name clicked for me. So let's go down memory lane and recall SavDraws and check in to see what he's been up to as of late. Hey there, I'm here to interrupt your regularly scheduled entertainment. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and engage in all the ways that YouTube likes. Just for the record, most of these clips, if not all of them, are from re-uploads because the original videos are gone. These clips are also incredibly old as far as digital media is concerned, so the quality isn't the best, and there isn't a whole lot that I can do about that. We all have to deal with it in some way or another. Additionally, a lot of these clips will use a variety of pronouns for Sav, but Sav's current pronouns are he, him, so please be respectful in the comments section. Sav belonged to an era of YouTubers that were generally referred to as Deviantart rant accounts, like old school Solar Sands and Deviantart Cringe, who has since rebranded. And off topic, it was kind of weird to me though, refreshed my memory a bit recently, that a lot of people shipped Sav with Solar Sands for some reason. Don't know why, but I think that's interesting and weird. This entire era of like DeviantArt cringe and rant reviews and things like that has mostly died out, with the genre being more focused now on broader issues with that platform, like their shift into Gen AI and the never-ending rampant flood of weird fetish content. The fetish content thing, though, has kind of been an issue for literally forever on that site, so it's like a never-ending well for someone to bitch and complain about. Within the 2010s era of DeviantArt rants, there was a subsection that focused on critiquing people's original characters, if what they did can even be considered critiquing. Despite the creators often saying that they were reviewing the characters and sometimes the background information for said characters, most of the popular channels devolved into roast-style content that often led to the most stupidest and nonsensical nitpicks that you can imagine for these characters. The original artists also tended to be random people who never agreed to have their characters featured in these types of videos, and would end up harassed by the audience of these reviewers, despite any disclaimer in the videos not to do so. The lack of consent for these types of critiques actually caused some of the reviewers who were working with more integrity, like asking permission first, to need to put up disclaimers in the beginning of their videos explaining that the videos weren't rants or roast, because roast and rants were what people just tended to expect when clicking on an OC review during this era because of the success of channels like SavDraws. While I have no doubt that many OC reviewers of this era started out in a place of genuinely wanting to try to help people, the reviewers that turned into more rant and roast style accounts tended to just be mean for the sake of being mean. Under the disguise of comedy, a lot of the rant reviewers would just throw out insults without first thinking more critically about the characters and concepts that they were reviewing, which just tended to show how underqualified they were at the time to be giving people advice on how to better their characters when they themselves couldn't think out and articulate proper points to criticize the characters with. Honestly, looking back at the content now that I could still find, it feels like someone who took like one creative writing class and thought that they needed to bestow that knowledge onto others, even though they only got like a D- in that class. This was especially evident when the reviewer would critique characters and concepts from communities and genres that they were not knowledgeable on, as the opinions became less and less relevant to the character review and focused more on just humiliating, usually unconsenting artists. Other members of the art communities would then step up in defense of these OC artists. It was overall a great thing that other artists stepped in to tell the rant reviewers that what they were doing was problematic in nature, as it was encouraging other artists, usually younger tween and teen artists, to be just as mean and dumb as they were, and by extension, were just killing critical thinking for the art community at large, since most of these roasts and rants were centered around the creator's own ill-informed and often contradictory opinions. When I initially got the idea to do this kind of video, like reminiscing of this era, all I can remember of SavDraws was the infamous video where he rants about the husky with the green tongue, and it took me quite a few days to remember the video and channel, but while I was looking for it, I stumbled across another relic of that era, and I think it summed up perfectly the issue with trying to review characters when you don't really have the skill set to be doing so, with this extremely small and ancient video opening up with what I can only imagine were teenagers mocking the spelling of this character's name.
Of course it. Okay, I fixed it.
Also, why is her name spelt like that? It's actually how her name is spelt.
Natale.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird.
That says Natale.
Yeah, it's usually IE, Natalie.
Yeah. That's Natal.
Natal. Hi, Natal.
Hero Natal. Not tail.
Alright.
Not tail. No tail.
No tail. Well, she doesn't have a tail, so...
Oh, you're correct. Congratulations.
It should probably go without saying, but just because you are unfamiliar with a name, or the culture the name is from, or the many different spellings of a name, doesn't mean that that name is misspelled. Literally just a 2-second Google search. And again, that summed up the extent of the critiques that you got with this era of rant reviewers, honestly. Petty and dumb shit that would change nothing about the character. Looking back at this era of content is actually kind of amazing. The amount of insecure artists who just thought that they were hot shit just being mean for the sake of being mean, all while disguising that bitterness as critiquing someone else's work. I feel like this type of content was popular among tweens and teens earlier in the creative journeys, ones where it was obvious they were being bullied in real life and wanted to see someone else treat it in a similar way, from the other side, of course. These types of reviews tended to give false hope and confidence to a lot of artists because at least mine isn't that bad, even if they were arguably under the same skill sets. These bad reviews tainted the opinions of a lot of still learning creatives, and at the time it even poisoned the well a little. Having fun and unique characters was thought of as cringe, edgy, and a Mary Sue, with no real critique to help flesh out the characters more beyond just shaming the artist for what the character already was. It was a lot of jealous, no fun allowed type of behavior, honestly. As I mentioned before, a major issue with a lot of these rant reviews was them targeting OCs for genres and communities that they weren't actually a part of, thus putting their ignorance on full display. This, of course, could have been resolved with some preliminary research into the subject matter before reviewing the character, or even just not mentioning the things about the character that you just didn't understand. It's okay to admit that you don't know enough about a subject, so you just decided not to comment on it. But this kind of nuance was lost at the time of this YouTube era because these creators wanted to focus on quick comedy, often just improving their jokes and meshing nonsense points between the jokes. This was also the era where screaming and being obnoxious just for the sake of being loud and blowing your own microphone out was seen as peak comedy. Honestly, the most annoying era for the people who weren't funny but really thought they were at the time. RIP to all the headphone users of the era. We are all due compensation for how many headphones that we lost from the speakers being blown out, honestly. SavDraws obviously was no exception to these points. He often criticized things that he didn't have a comprehensive knowledge about, lacking the necessary vocabulary to make adequate points against something, edge, often contradicted himself within a few words of a point, and was really feeling himself in the loud means funny kind of thing that was going on. But where Sav shined in comparison to the other reviewers of this similar nature was his video editing being better than the average channel, or at the very least he put in significantly more effort editing his content than a lot of his peers did at the time. Or he hired someone to edit his content, because I think that was a thing, but again, all of Sav's content is gone right now. But I vaguely remember Ghost maybe being a part of the editing strategy at the time, but that creator is also gone now. It's strange what kind of things can help people find legitimacy in a creator, but halfway decent editing back in the 2010s kind of went a long way. Like I've mentioned before, Sav's channel on YouTube is no longer under the SavDraws moniker, and he has privated all of his content from that era, but there is still a plethora of commentary-style videos criticizing his content and behavior from back then, so I just wanted to review some of the issues that people had with Sav, besides generalized, can't take criticism that is said about every bigger creator who people have issues with. Part 1. How not to fix a character. Using the Anthro Husky with a green tongue video as a jumping off point, one of the biggest issues with Sav's content at this time was, I was digging around on Deviantart and stumbled across this character and decided to review it because I didn't like it.
It was pointed out to me by Pastel. We were just messing around on Deviantart and it came up. I think I found another OC of theirs and we were going through their gallery and it just kind of came up. And it kind of stood out to me a little bit, mainly because I wanted to punch it. Yes. Mainly because, oh my god.
Not asking permission to review it, immediately going into the review with the bias of, I wanted to punch it when I first saw it. Of course, this meant that the review was going to turn negative quick. I understand the mindset a lot of people have online, that if you post something, someone should be allowed to critique it. Hell, that's how I make my own videos, commenting and critiquing on the behavior of other creators, but there's a big difference with critiquing the behavior and work of a popular public figure as opposed to just finding a random drawing someone did and tearing into their work with no apparent reason other than making content. Who is the review like this actually supposed to help? When it comes to art reviews, they're only successful if the person being reviewed wanted the opinions in the first place. When making a commentary video, I might say you as if I'm speaking directly to the person that I'm discussing, but I have no real expectations that the person will ever see that video, just kind of a weird quirk of mine. But when you're reviewing someone's art, with actual tips and advice for the artwork, there is a certain expectation that you would have as the reviewer for them to see your review and to implement those changes to a degree. But that becomes a messy affair when you're just picking people randomly who never asked or agreed to a review. They're going to feel wrongly attacked. Moving on to the next big point, it was very early into this review of the Husky that it was apparent that Sav might not have been very familiar with furries at the time, or at least it came across that way because of the jokes that he was making.
Cause he has a green fucking bulge and he doesn't have a dick! He doesn't have a dick!
At least I hope they were just jokes, like the bulge instead of genitals, and nitpicking the fact that the character was labeled as a husky with minimal traits indicative of a husky.
The character's name is Kenzo, and I guess he is a Siberian husky. And let's just take a look and look at this character here. Does this look like a Siberian husky? What? I'm sorry. What? What is this? I'm legitly confused on why this. I mean, I can understand the tail and the face, kind of.
Could have easily been labeled wolf as far as I'm concerned, and I would have just shrugged and agreed personally. The only reason I really want to say this is that the bit in the beginning could have been a joke was due to Sav harping on the neon green and the color palette having nothing to do with huskies, with later saying, oh, the neon green makes sense with the background story being introduced, the concept of this character being a raver or whatever.
But everything else, huskies don't have neon green. Neon green has nothing to do with huskies. And why do they have to add the green nostrils? He is a real techno head and a huge love for techno music. Goes to raves and concerts. Oh, that explains the neon green.
But then again, Sav also goes on about the realism of the character for some reason, with complaining about the neon green nostrils and how some aspects of the character's backstory felt like something that could happen in real life.
Story. He has never known his dad. Always lived alone with his mom. His dad leaved her mom. His dad leaved his mom when she was pregnant because he didn't want to have anything to do with Kenzo. Her pregnancy was pretty much an accident, but she wanted to keep the baby. Now that's actually something that I could believe happened in the real world. So that I wouldn't be considered a Mary Sue-ish trait. I honestly think that happens very often, and that is not a bad thing.
I frankly never understood that second point because it's an anthropomorphic dog. They don't need to have experienced something that could have happened in real life to be a good or compelling character. That's the point of fiction, honestly. Sav's credibility as this review goes on sinks kind of lower and lower the more you realize that he wasn't plotting out his points before saying them, and how shaky his voice actually gets when he's contradicting himself. As an example, the part where Sav complains about the character on the symbol background and says that the creator chose the fur color to be the same as the background was so that they wouldn't have to color the fur.
And I find it funny how they choose the fur color to be the same color as the background so that we didn't have to color it.
Which is just overall kind of an odd point to make. And I wonder was the color saturation and resolution on Sav's monitor just really wrong at this time? Was it turned up way too high on their color balance? Is that why they couldn't see that the fur color and the background colors were completely different and that the character was colored in? Is an oversaturation issue on their screen the reason they also had an issue with neon colors despite having kind of a neon-esque background in their review videos? Or did Sav need glasses at the time? I just have a hard time believing that an artist would not catch the color thing without some kind of other explanation besides being dumb. As Sav gets into reviewing the actual backstory of this character, you can tell he started to struggle with valid points of advice for this character. after finishing mocking the age of the furry.
Alright. Name is Kenzo. Age is 20 in human years. Like, what? Hold on. This character is 140 years old in dog years.
Which notoriously age like regular human beings unless stated otherwise in their canon, like in Two Kinds, for example. He mumbles his way into like the rest of the background. I really feel like Sav was grasping at straws for points and jokes during this section of the review, like resorting to mocking the artist's grammar before moving on to an attempt at being serious by recommending a ratio of what he deemed to be good and bad character traits.
Which have resulted in some people abused his kindness for their own good. Which have resulted in some people abused his kindness for their own good. What is it? What is sentence? A real goof. Loves to be funny and joke around. He is a huge family person, loves his family, especially his mom. Okay, so apparently he has a lot of good traits. Now, to create a good character, you have to have a lot of good and bad traits. I spot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and possibly 2 bad ones. So 5 to 2 isn't really a good ratio. I would probably give him about 3 or 4 bad traits just to make it about even. So there's, not even 3. I'd give him about 4 because if you want to have a good character, you need to have good and bad personality traits. Nobody's perfect. Everybody has their flaws, and to add someone who has no flaws is very, very just perfect in every way,
But I think this is a very rudimentary way of rating a character. I don't think that character traits should always be classified as good or bad, and what traits are good or bad is often open to interpretation. For example, on Kenzo's sheet, he is listed as being a big goof who loves to joke around. While on the surface, this can be seen as a positive character trait. Depending on the situation the character is put in, it can be a negative trait as well. Like, what if Kenzo is so goofy that he struggles with his composure during situations intended to be more serious? Toward the end of the character's backstory, Sav says that the way the character was written, with a lot of bad things happening to him but wanting to do good for others, and how the character was good in regards to like writing of the backstory because it shows a reason for how the character thought and acted.
So, other than the fact that he's very edgy, he actually takes his bad comings and makes it into a good outcome, which oftenly doesn't happen with a lot of OCs. Like, it's good that they have a reason for how he acts and how he thinks.
But that doesn't necessarily make Kenzo a well-written character. You don't have to have a detailed past for the character to be compelling. You also don't need to know why a character acts in any particular way, and some characters can be more intriguing because we don't know and can speculate on why they are a certain way, be it the past that we don't know about or a personality condition. Take May from Avatar as an example. Mopey and broody, May who acknowledges that she had a standard childhood with happy and loving parents, but she still turned out the way that she is despite all of that. Basically what I'm saying is that you can't really tell if a character is well written just from a bullet point list in a description box. You need to see how that character is in action to see how they engage with the characters and environment around them in order to see if the writer actually can make the character compelling and well-rounded or not. I also want to throw in that I don't understand Sav's need to call everything edgy during this era. Having a bunch of bad stuff happen to you doesn't inherently make you yourself edgy. I would define edgy characters as those characters that are cartoonishly insane, those evil characters made by tweens expressing angst for the first time. But that is also just my opinion, since being edgy is kind of subjective, so I won't harp too much on it. Besides saying that Mavis from Hotel Transylvania is definitely not edgy in any shape or form. Sav goes on in this video to discuss how Kenzo's creator had a good understanding of psychology and behavior.
There's always a reason on why you act a certain way because of psychology, and I feel like this person has a very good understanding of how the past can influence your behavior to things or people.
Despite there being no real indicator that the artist does or doesn't have a good grasp on psychology, because again, you can't tell how well a character is actually written if you don't see their behavior and personality in action. But also, Sav doesn't go into any detail on why this artist seemed to have any sort of grasp on psychology. You actually don't need to know anything about psychology to know that sometimes people go through bad things without themselves becoming bad people. Immediately following the comments about the artist having a good grasp of psychology, Sav backtracks to say that the artist doesn't know how to build a character's personality because they didn't list an adequate list of likes and dislikes for this character.
God damn. I find it funny how you have a lot of love options there and only hate, you know, the basic fucking things that everyone hates. He has a very good understanding of psychological understanding, but the fact that he doesn't really know how to build personality and likes and dislikes, he only knows like how he acts.
Which, of course, is a weird contradiction because either the artist has a good grasp on psychology or they don't. Because I would assume that a good grasp on psychology would make you able to build a character. At least in, like, the viewpoint of, like, Sav's review, at the very least. A character's arbitrary likes or dislikes don't make the character good or bad, but can be a jumping off point to contribute to their actions, I guess. Which, the storytelling through the character's behavior is, again, what actually makes the character good or bad. Is the horse I'm beating dead yet? Of course it's not, because Sav would further go on to mumble his way through some kind of point that there was too much put into the backstory, but not enough to the character.
And it's very interesting because it seems like they haven't really put much thought into the character itself, but the story. It seems like they put more thought into the story than they do the actual character.
Now this could, in theory, be about like Sav not understanding that furry rough sheets are typically nude so that other artists drawing the character can see like the total fur pattern on the character. But I guess it could also be that Sav used to think that a character needed a certain amount of negative and positive traits in a comprehensive list of likes and dislikes to be a fully fleshed out character. I'm just not really sure why Sav thinks that the artist didn't put enough into this character, to be honest. I can really see why on Sav's current TikTok account that he acknowledges that he used to have a lot of like really bad art takes during this era, and I hope this overly simplified thought process on characters was one of the things that he knows that he didn't make a ton of sense on. This critique was obviously not very good for a variety of reasons. First of all, the artist was never asked permission for this review to even be made in the first place. They didn't ask for the review, they didn't ask for a critique, nothing. Sav just found the character and decided to make the video. Due to Sav ripping this character apart, the artist actually had to take a hiatus due to the harassment that Sav's audience was giving them.
If Bad Wolf Roxy is watching this, why the fuck did you take this numbnut seriously?
Sav's own criticisms for this character were all terribly biased and often contradictory. This review could have also been helped just a little by a script, because it seemed to me that Sav like either shot off the cuff or had maybe like bullet points, but not a structured script on what they wanted to talk about. Sav could have also benefited from reviewing a character from something he was a little more familiar with at the time, which probably also would have helped with just how mean he was about this character. Don't go into the character review already thinking, I want to punch him in the face. If you have an issue with rave culture or furries, maybe don't review bomb a random OC that is a furry and a raver. Part 2. OC X Canon Shipping with a splash of self-shipping. Sav also used to have a big problem with shipping OCs with canon characters in established franchises. I'm also not a huge fan of OC in canon ships. I have no investment in your OCs, and I'm not a really big fan of self-shipping either, but I'm not going to run around and shit on other people's fun. Unless, of course, that person shipping their OC or themselves with canon characters is delusional and tries to lay claim onto that character as if they own the canon character. I see it often enough that I no longer think it's just a long-running internet joke that I don't understand when people do this. I've even seen floating around, rumor mill style, on Twitter that there's some rando that's been copyright striking fan art of like some particular character. I think like one of the horse girl characters. I don't remember. But he thought that the character was his because they shipped themselves with the character or something like that. I don't know. It's weird. It's frankly weird. Most of Sav's points with the OC X canon shipping stuff from the video I'm using as a reference point are kind of irrelevant to the nature of OC X canon shipping.
Another one is that you can't claim them as your own because it is a canon character, it's not yours.
People who participate in OC X canon shipping know that the canon character isn't theirs, so no one reasonably is trying to lay claim on the canon character. We are obviously outlying like the delusional people that I mentioned before that obviously need mental health help. One of Sav's points and why he disliked OCX canon shipping was that the character being shipped with the OC tended to just be a popular character and it was overused in ships.
For one, you have to realize that this character has been shipped with so many people and it is probably overdone.
And honestly, that's kind of like a non-issue when it comes to this. Certain characters are just popular for a reason, and rational people just out to have fun are not at all worried by how many other people ship their fictional original characters with the other canon character, you know? Despite not being very invested in OCX canon shipping, I do see benefits from it. I've seen a lot of creators who participate in OCX canon shipping, and even self-shipping to a degree, use shipping their characters with canon characters as a way to explore and develop their OCs more before moving them onto their own stories unrelated to the canon characters that they were originally shipped with.
Now, what bothers me about self-inserts is that it's not a good ship. For example, you won't get fans off of the ship. There's not a lot of people that will support it.
Sav's other point that you won't get fans off of having an OCX canon ship or a self ship is honestly freaking hilarious to me now in the big year of 2026, because there is in fact a creator who is fairly popular because she ships herself with that fat fish from SpongeBob. But regardless of that in particular, I don't readily see OCX canon shippers or self shippers who are doing it to get fans. They're just in it for the love of the game, baby. Now, this is a big tinfoil hat talk, right? So forgive me for like the copious amounts of speculation that I'm going to get into right at this section. But I actually don't think a lot of Sav's point here was that people won't get popular from OCX canon ships or self ships. Hear me out, hear me out. I think that this video in particular was just kind of a very thinly veiled way of saying that certain artists won't get popular from it because their artwork in particular was not up to snuff. When Sav was using other people's art as examples of work that he didn't like and adds his points over it, like it's a bad ship and you won't get popular from it, etc., the reoccurring theme that I noticed is that the art that he was using was things that I would deem as beginner or amateur level work. The point of people not getting popular from OCX canon shipping and self-shipping was easily disproven even way back when Sav originally made this video, and you don't know if a ship is good or not from just a couple of doodles that someone randomly made. What you do know, just based on the random doodles that you stumbled across, is that 1, you don't like OCX canon shipping for whatever internalized reason, and B, that you don't think that art is good. Or what I infer is that you don't think that art was good because why else would you only use a particular skill level as your examples in this video? Of course, the original video could have had masterclass illustrations in the examples, but that original video is gone, so I'm just inferring from what I'm seeing in this reaction that I'm reacting to. Reactionception. Sav also makes some weird points about OCX canon shipping not making sense because the OC isn't from the same universe as the canon character.
When you mix two different things from different shows or different genres, it kind of gets a little clustered and not well put together.
And then goes on to what basically amounts to your OC isn't ever going to be canon.
For example, your OC is in a different universe than the characters. For example, Sega, if you're going for a Sonic OC, Sega's not going to be like, oh yeah, I like this character, let's put it in the show, or let's put it in the game. Since there is so many fan characters, they're not going to do that.
And like, despite making this video about his issues with OCX canon shipping, I don't really think Sav understood what fanfiction was, because, yeah, no shit, your OC isn't ever going to become canon. Something in a fan work never being canon isn't a deterrent from fan creations. Did you log into AO3 and think that everything you were reading was only canon characters in it and it was real? Of course not, so why even make this kind of ridiculous point? Sav also goes in to try to reiterate the point he made earlier about popular canon characters having like a lot of OCs shipped with them, and how it's now an issue of originality, and how a lot of these OCs are Mary Sue's, which I'm gonna get more into that weird Mary Sue thing in part 3. And Sav discourages OC X canon shipping because if your OC was in a crowd of OCs all shipped with this canon character, the canon character isn't going to pick your OC.
For example, if you were to look at a OC and the swarm of OC family, characters of that show or genre, the main character isn't going to choose your OC out of all the others. And that's what really gives OC X canon ships a really bad name, because if you look at it, a canon character most likely wouldn't even know your character. It wouldn't even recognize your character. It wouldn't, they wouldn't really care because they have their canon friends and they wouldn't really know.
And okay? This again is just dumb as rocks because, bud, fictional characters aren't choosing anything. They're not real. There is literally no point into thinking, how would Sonic feel? Or whatever, because Sonic isn't fucking real. He literally cannot care about who he is shipped with because he's not fucking real. And thus, he has no thoughts or feelings besides what a human writer and artist assign him to think and feel. Literally just say that you think OCX canon is cringe and weird and move on. You don't need to try to pull all of these irrelevant points out of thin air to justify you not liking something and padding a runtime on a ridiculous video. You are just allowed to not like something. Part 3. Buzzwords to make you feel bad. When you are chronically online, it's pretty common to pick up a particular kind of language when interacting with others online. The internet has its own flavor of slang that tends to go from niche communities to widespread until it finally dies and becomes quote-unquote uncool when it hits the mainstream and they start using it in McDonald's ads and stuff. But by the time that it hits the mainstream commercial graveyard, some people like me have adopted it into their everyday lexicon and just have to kinda live with that, unfortunately. During the era that SavDraws was popular on YouTube, the buzzwords were things like cringe, edgy, and even cancer. The issue when you are adopting buzzwords into everyday speech because you read it a lot from your internet friends and it's in a mega viral meme or whatever, is that sometimes those buzzwords are used in such an overabundance that you start to use them in ways that don't even make sense anymore. Take Sav calling everything edgy or edge in such an overabundance that there are compilation videos available of Sav just repeating the word over and over again, and the misuse of that word was added into titles and thumbnails of videos critical of Sav's content.
Bam! Edge. And no, I don't have another word for edge. If you're gonna have a really edgy OC like this.
When you think of edgy characters, in theory, you should be thinking of moody or broody characters with tragic backstories, perhaps, the embodiment of teenage angst, or even the characters who are manic and homicidal, but don't have enough going on for them besides that. That's what I think of for edgy characters, at least. Characters who are just dressed in a particular way but are otherwise happy and goofy are not what I would consider edgy. Again, beating a dead horse, but Mavis from Hotel Transylvania is not edgy. She's barely even a cartoon goth. Versus Wednesday from the Netflix Wednesday show, I would say that she's an edgy character. Kenzo from the review in part 1 is not in any shape or form edgy. He's just a raver. Versus Sasuke from Naruto, he was one of the OG edgelords that many tweens and teens fawned over for years. I would also say that Shadow the Hedgehog was a fairly edgy character until more recently. Then we get into Sav calling a bunch of stuff cancer if he didn't like it, which was pointed out to be rather insensitive to the people who have survived cancer, people actively suffering through cancer, or those who have loved ones with cancer or had passed away from cancer.
What I'm going to be talking about today is the cancer of OC or self-inserts with a canon character, especially on Deviantart. Deviantart is the home of cancer's shipping.
When it was a buzzword to call something cancer, it was intended to mean a particular thing was harmful to a community. Under the definition of the 2015s, Gen AI would be considered a cancer on all creative fields now. But calling a whole community cancer who don't tend to cause problems for the general internet at large, it's just kind of a dick move. OCX canon shipping? not a cancer to anything. Pixel bases, also not a cancer. No one is forcing you to use a pixel base. Sav also had a big issue with the concept of Mary Sues, which, like the word edge and edgy, I think Sav was too ready to call a myriad of different types of characters just a Mary Sue without adhering to any particular definition of the term. In my decrepit old age, it was well known that a Mary Sue was often a fandom OC that the creator would just throw into the universe, and suddenly the entire cast revolved around that character. Often the Mary Sue was everyone's favorite or best friend, even to the villains, and would be the strongest and most special character in the universe they occupied. While it is possible for adults to be poor at writing and make their own fandom Mary Sues, more often Mary Sues were self-inserts of younger tween and teen artists who wanted to put an idolized version of themselves into a series that they really loved. Self-inserts, something in general Sav also didn't particularly seem to like, is a form of escapism in a way for a creator of the self-insert to rationalize the content that they were consuming or even creating, as it is common for artists and writers to make their own self-inserts into their own original stories. The time in which the How to Make a Mary Sue content was popular during the cringe culture time of the internet, it is often noted to be a particularly troubling time to be a beginner artist, as they were often shamed for making what people deemed to be Mary Sues. One comment on the How to Make a Homestuck Mary Sue cites that they felt that the Mary Sue series messed with them mentally and is glad that Sav stopped making them altogether. One of the re-uploads I found of Sav's content was the How to Make a Homestuck Mary Sue, and I just sat and thought, what does Sav have against alternative fashion? I realized through watching a few of these re-uploads and clips that when Sav was calling something a Mary Sue or edgy or cringe, often it was characters exhibiting design elements typically seen in alternative, scene, or goth spaces. Bringing it back once again, and I'm sorry, but calling Mavis edgy because, what, she has black lipstick and striped socks? Calling Kenzo edgy because neon green and likes raves? Now we get into this Homestuck Mary Sue, and the character is given, like, a poorly drawn pentagram, pink-tipped hair, a spiked choker, Converse, all while Sav is joking about her being the most super-duper special troll. Was Sav bullied by, like, the local emos or something? Because this is definitely a weird pattern of behavior that I'm noticing. I also had initially thought that, like, did Sav even ever read Homestuck when he was coloring the troll's eyes wrong? But then we get into the human-demon-troll hybrid thing, and she has rainbow blood, and I just gave up being frustrated at a mean-spirited joke video. In general, the time in which Sav rose to popularity on YouTube during the cringe culture time frame, where it was popular just to shit on people for having fun so they themselves seemed more mature in comparison, was deeply unhealthy. Not only for the creators of that content, but also the viewers. Inexperienced artists and writers of this time were stilted in their creative pursuits due to people wanting to mock them for their efforts at making unique characters. This was additionally a weird time because while it was a time frame of mocking people for being cringy, it was also a time frame in which there was, like, a rise in normalizing fandom culture, but also if you participated in fandom culture in a way that others deemed more, like, sophisticated, I guess. What I guess I'm getting at here with the blah blah rambling is that Sav rose to popularity in a time in which it was kind of encouraged to be a bully, just until it wasn't, thus starting the domino effect of people making content criticizing Sav's content and behavior even though it was previously encouraged. While Sav isn't the source of the rise in this new era of art and commentary, it would be remiss not to point out that a lot of art commentary channels that were popular during this time got a significant boost by jumping on the bandwagon to talk about and shit on Sav, even if most of that content is no longer there in its original forms to view. All of this reminiscing has led us to the conclusion point of the video. Is Sav still a bully? Part 4. Where is he now? Despite the abundance of things that people didn't care for when it came to Sav, many people still adored him and his content. As he aged and matured and came into himself more, he started to change his content and distance himself from the Deviantart review and rant spaces before eventually privating his old YouTube content altogether. Sav didn't disappear from the internet altogether, though, despite what some people speculate. Instead, he just rebranded to his current moniker of Savsco, which is more focused on his own projects and tidbits of his own life. As far as I can tell, he is most active on TikTok currently, but even on that platform, the last post that he made at the time of scripting this was the beginning of January of 2026. He also has an active Etsy storefront selling Artist Alley style goodies like art prints, keychains, and some jewelry pieces. He isn't shy on his social media on who he used to be, making joke videos about how he used to post his bad art takes as a teenager. He has a video up on his TikTok profile explaining one of the reasons for him leaving his YouTube career, besides all of the critical content about him, was due to the toxicity of other creators behind the scenes.
Okay, I might as well say this now. Forgive me, I just woke up. But here is something that you guys probably don't know. And one of the reasons why I left, other than the rants about me, you know, I was in a server with a lot of the other art YouTubers at the time who were in the scene, and when I joined that, it made me realize that I did not want to be a part of this community, because the majority of them were very, very mean behind this, like legitimately very mean behind the scenes. And I won't go too into it, but there was a specific few that would specifically make fun of me for my weight. And I just joined, like I didn't do much other than like, you know, whatever. And they were making fun of one of my streams or something because of the thumbnail or something I was really fat in or something. And I won't name specific names, but yeah. The one person that I did know that wasn't an asshole in that server was Solar Sands. He was very neutral on fucking everything. He never really talked in that server, so whatever. But yeah.
While he doesn't name any particular creators, it is interesting that he would mention this, since a lot of the larger name creators from the era that he was popular with are also no longer around, or have also followed suit to rebrand themselves in one way or another. Knowing and acknowledging that you have to step away from something deeply unhealthy is actually a really great life skill to have, and I'm pretty proud of this stranger for being able to move forward in his life. Moving forward in his life included visibly transitioning, now sporting a righteous beard, and going back to school. His resume says that he has a Bachelor's of Science, Emerging Media, and Digital Art degree, and he might have gotten it in like 2015, unless the resume is old and hasn't been updated. I don't know. And he is currently working with a small group of talent to make an indie animation pilot. I can't say much about the progress behind the scenes for the animated pilot, but publicly they have a Patreon set up with some concept posts, a trailer on Sav's channel, and there's also been a Kickstarter to fund the project that sadly seemed to have failed. Overall, I think part of the reason that the project seems to be kind of stagnant numbers-wise on the public-facing front is because there's not enough advertising for this project. I don't think Sav is taking advantage of the fact that people who enjoyed his content in the past have been inquiring about him on sites like Deviantart. I understand wanting to get away from the content that you used to produce as SavDraws, but that audience base is still around to a degree, and since we all have grown up in the last 10 years or so, many of them would probably be able to better support your current projects. Sometimes moving on means making amends and acknowledgements of past behavior beyond just a short TikTok video. Yes, a lot of the previous issues are close to, if not already 10 plus years old, but that just means that you've had a lot of time to grow and change, and a lot of time for people to really forget about all the drama, especially since you were apparently only 16 or 17 years old when making that previous content. I think that if you ever did do a true comeback, a fun way to do so would be to revisit the old content and do kind of a retro kind of reaction to yourself from back then and point out all of the things that you were wrong about and all of the ways that you've changed since then. But, of course, it's also fine if you don't want to utilize your social media in that way. I was just thinking about the metrics to get more attention onto your upcoming project or projects. If you, the viewer, want to support Sav's animated series, check out the link in the description for the trailer. Besides the surface-level issues with the progress of the animated pilot, Sav seems to be doing well based on what you can see from his TikTok profile. He seems to have dropped the douchebag persona and isn't trying to force himself to be funny in his content, instead focusing a lot on sketchbook videos and work in progress for art pieces that look pretty delightful. Speaking of art pieces, I did notice that Sav has a post on his page asking for a particular art piece to be critiqued, and so, since he has asked on the post, I thought it would be fun and be kind of like in the spirit of what made Sav so popular back in the 2010s, and I decided that I'm going to give a little critique on his piece here. Now, if you haven't seen any of my past critique content, I was taught in my university courses to treat critiques kind of like a sandwich. Say something you like, something to improve upon, maybe a way to improve upon the thing, and something else you like. This helps the critique feel not as harsh to the artist receiving it, especially if you have a more kind of blunt way of delivering the advice. To start off my sandwich here, I really love the design of this character. I'm kind of a sucker for animal ears on humanoid characters like this. Give him bat wings or a tail and like my heart is forever his. I also like the hair on him. It kind of reminds me of a young Bjorn Anderson, but that also might kind of be the point since he was pretty popular reference for a lot of vampire designs. I honestly have a little input on the design of the character himself. He honestly looks fantastic. Most of the issues arise with this piece in the composition of the environment. The lines are just kind of all over the place. There doesn't seem to be a very dedicated vanishing point to this image. Since this image was made using a digital art program, I assume at least, I would encourage future works to utilize the ruler features more just to make sure that everything kind of just lines up correctly. While the lines are just kind of pointing wherever they want to as far as the perspective goes, I do love how you actually drew out the lines in an organic way instead of just making everything like bone straight or using a 3D model, as a lot of artists will tend to do for their backgrounds nowadays. I enjoy the added depth the line way adds to the furniture. It helps the figure seem a part of the scene as opposed to just kind of being pasted on. The perspective of this image has other issues than just the lines pointing in random directions, though, and the most glaring is the perceived size of the room, and mostly the bed. Where is this figure's legs going in this image? Is he like side saddled on like a toddler sized bed? This could be a lore kind of thing, like I guess, maybe, vampires not sleeping on beds, yada yada, but as a random outside observer, I wouldn't know that just based on this image alone. I think the easiest way to fix this kind of issue would probably just be getting rid of the back headboard post, and extend the blankets that the creator is wrapped in. This would also mean adjusting the end table as well, unfortunately, but it would open the image up significantly more in my opinion. I like the idea of adding texture to the wall since walls tend to look pretty flat in a lot of images. The pattern on this wall reminds me of like the feather painting trend that was apparently popular once upon a time. That being said though, the wall is also causing the room and subsequently the bed to look even smaller. The advice from before about removing the headboard might resolve this, but you could also play around with moving the corner of the wall, and depending on where you move the corner, adding a glimpse of flooring might also add a roomier appearance to the environment. If the intention is for the room to seem small, you could make the bed closer to the wall by moving the corner split closer to the end table. I also really like the idea of the lighting in this piece, but I feel like you could be more dynamic with it. As some comments on your video pointed out, the knob at the front of the bed looks a little flat with how you have the lighting distributed. I feel like if you pushed the dark values more through the piece, you could also resolve a lot of the flatness that comes across in parts. It also wouldn't hurt to reshape some of the intense lighting on the right-hand side a touch either. Overall, I think the piece is very nice. I love the character design and how the combination of the cool shadows and warm light basking him give a nice juxtaposition of mysterious and calming, despite the blood on his face, book, and bed. I feel like there was a lot of time and love put into the figure in this piece, but you might have lost focus the further the image got away from him. I know making adjustments to a piece like this in like a painterly style might be a bit of a hassle, so this is definitely just some advice to use for the next piece moving forward. So to answer the question posed at the end of the last part, is Sav still a bully? Well, honestly, I don't know, but I don't think so. I don't know because Sav has done a pretty decent job separating himself from the spotlight and doesn't seem to interact much with other people online besides responding to occasional comments on his TikTok. Despite this, I don't think he would be a bully even if he did get back into the space of communicating on other people's work, just because he's made acknowledgments of his previous content being not the best. In addition to that, I feel like a lot of the bully-like behavior that he exhibited was fueled and exasperated from the time frame, encouraging people to discourage what was deemed as cringe content. Sav was a teenager. acting like a teenager tends to do when they become popular, let things go to his head. I think it was probably for the best for his mental health and emotional development to take a step away from the internet limelight in order to mature among people in real life. Sav has the opportunity of a lifetime to start over with his content and have a lot of former fans who've grown up and matured in the time that he's been gone, ready to support him on his new journey if he gives them the opportunity to do so. He doesn't have to start at square one, honestly, and for the sake of his animated series he's trying to launch, I'm hoping he takes that chance so he can share something pretty cool with the world. Were you a former fan of Sav's content? Do you miss his work? Or were you more critical of his work back in the day? I want to hear your thoughts. As always, please be polite in the comment section. Remember to like this video and subscribe for more random reminiscing. This video, like all of my content, is brought to you by Patreon, so thank you so much to Ippo, Alec, Mel, Chrome, and Zomboy for subscribing. If you want to support me on Patreon, tiers start as little as $1 a month. That's all for now. This is Finn, signing off. Until next time.
I can't move on till I let go. I feel so lost, never at home. Need to be strong, every breath hold. 'Cause I can't move on till I